loudly.
Right here, pumpkins are doing this. What I was thinking.
Great. All right. Just about ready here.
Stuck on this one.
Yeah, and then do you do like having checklists for the people who registered? Yeah, you did that.
Yeah.
Oh,
So.
All righty.
Yeah.
Okay. Stand right there.
okay. So here, this reaches. Yes. Okay. Alrighty. Thank you all so much for coming. So today I'm going to be, or I'm actually going to just do one thing real quick. I'm going to make this smaller. Sorry, let me do that real quick. Okay, that should hopefully not get in the way. So today I'm going to be talking about a topic that's very interesting to me. Hopefully, obviously, to you all for attending. Is outsmarting your smartphone for a healthier relationship with your device. And again, stand over here. Okay, here we go. There we go. So just a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about today. So brief history of smartphone and usage, the psychology behind usage, primarily the applications, key terms in research, how smartphone usage may be affecting us, my research, which I'm excited to share with today, and then what you can do about it. Okay. So just kind of to get us started with some numbers here. To get sort of in the mindset of sort of the proliferation of technology and how much just there is that's out there. So in the case of smartphones, 93% of people with a college degree or higher own a smartphone. This really kind of includes everyone here in this room. This was a study that was done, or a survey that was done between 2011 and 2021, so pretty recent. And I'm expecting that number just to kind of continue to be going up. And then another from Pew Research, also back in 2021, 7 billion people around the world that have a smartphone. Again, that number is probably still also going to continue to go up. And then 15% of American adults are smartphone-only internet users. And this is kind of an interesting one, basically being that your smartphone is your only device. You don't have like a desktop or a laptop kind of thing. This number is actually going down. My guess on this is probably due to COVID, because people having to be home and it's very hard to do things on their one device, your smartphone. But just kind of an interesting statistic and just number that's sort of out there that's been looked at. So a very brief snapshot here of history. Again, very, very brief, of how we got here with technology. Going back to 1990 with the invention of the World Wide Web. Now, the first world prototype was actually created in the 1960s, but it took on a much more noted, recognizable form in 1990 with Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web, and it entered into people's homes. So if anyone here remembers or knows what dial-up is, when you're actually like hardwired into the internet, that's what that was. And so basically it was now more accessible to people because they come into their actual homes and you could use it on your personal devices, computers. So fast forward almost 10 years later, and people are starting to see that people were starting to have some issues with the internet usage and just the accessibility and everything you could find on the internet. So some studies started being done and some research on what they sort of dubbed problematic internet usage. And the main research there was Kimberly Young out of the University of Pittsburgh. And her fellow researchers described 5 specific subtypes of what they called internet addiction. And that was cyber sexual addiction, cyber relationship addiction, net compulsions, information overload, which was what they call compulsive web surfing, and then computer addiction, which actually referred to obsessive computer game playing. So then going over into the early aughts, we have what they started calling problematic smartphone usage. And that started coming out because obviously devices were now, around, which I'll get into here in a moment. And they started to see that some of the issues that have been happening with problematic internet usage was sort of similar to what was happening with problematic smartphone usage. Namely, and some of the scales and the surveys basically is another way to put it, that they had been using to study problematic internet usage could actually be adapted very well for problematic smartphone usage because some of the problems were the same. Namely, things like social isolation, job loss, academic failure, financial debt, and family conflicts in regards to addiction. So that's sort of like a very brief snapshot of this history of how we got here today. And I like to show this graph, even though granted we are well beyond 2013. But the main thing being is just to kind of see how quickly the US this is just for the US, cell phone evolution happens. So just over the course of just 30 years, and we go from this huge brick of a phone from back in the early 80s to what we have today. For the most part, it hasn't changed that much, which is, you know, just a screen and no keyboard and everything on our devices. Obviously, we now have much faster processing speeds. The cameras are much better. You know, now that I think some of them can even fold. So, you know, there's obviously a lot that's come since 2013, but the general concept is being that it hasn't changed too much from kind of having a glass screen, a very smooth, clean device. But out of interest, does anyone remember any of these? Maybe your mom or your dad or someone had these or whatever. I mean, you know, dating myself, but I'm basically from here. Definitely had a candy bar phone. And love that thing, love playing Snake on it. So anyways, just kind of showing just sort of this really fast evolution. And who knows where we'll kind of be 30 years from now. We should all be around for it. It should be pretty interesting to see. Alrighty. So who here knows who this is? You can just call it out. Steve Jobs. Yes, Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs is a pretty smart guy. And he really revolutionized the world of mobile devices, right? So back in January 9th, 2007, he came out with the iPhone. Now the iPhone in the grand scheme of things was a pretty small phone. I mean, but he had really thought of everything. This phone literally fit perfectly in the palm of your hand. It was just one clean piece of aluminum. He had eliminated the keyboard entirely, which was like unheard of at that time, and had made it into this beautiful glass screen that you could just touch and interact with. And it was pretty incredible. It was like pretty kind of a big deal. Granted, the price point for this device was $499 at that time, which was pretty out of reach for a lot of people. But the main thing being is that when Steve Jobs came out with this, all other manufacturers basically knew they had to follow suit, and they did. The bigger deal, I feel like, though, actually came almost over a year later, in July 10, 2008, with the App Store. And with the App Store, the door was basically open into an entirely new world of content for consumers, and companies caught on pretty quickly at the profound influence they could have on people now anywhere, anytime. They could follow you around and access you anywhere. So now they don't know who this guy is, this funky yogi here. You know who this guy is? It's okay if you don't, because well, Steve Jobs was sort of on the front end, you know, sort of really revolutionizing the device and the look and feel of the device itself. This was BJ Fogg, and he was actually more on the back end, changing the landscape of mobile devices by how consumers use tools and applications on their phones. So he was over at Stanford University, and he created at the time what's called the Persuasive Technology Lab at Stanford. Now it has nicer names like the Peace Innovation Lab or Behavior Design Lab. I don't know where they're at now. But basically, his main claim to fame was he created what was called, he had a behavioral model proprietary to him. And in September 2007, so the same year the iPhone came out on the scene, 75 students went through Fogg's 10-week program learning his behavioral model, and they dubbed this class the Facebook class. And why is that? Because they started to kind of make applications and use apps that were already out, such as Facebook, to start kind of tooling around and seeing what worked and what didn't. And collectively, they amassed 16 million users, $1 million in advertising revenue, and a formula that would captivate a generation. So what are these graduates doing? Well, these graduates went on to work and design products at the likes of Uber, Facebook, Google, pretty big names. I think everyone probably recognizes this in this room. And together in Fogg's lab, they studied and developed the techniques to make apps and gadgets addictive, for lack of a really better way of putting it. So that's BJ Fogg. And now I won't go like super in depth on his model, there's graphs and other things, but just basically saying that the main concept of his model is that we act when three forces converge. And that's motivation, so us being motivated to do something, ability or simplicity, keeping it simple and accessible, and a prompt, something that gets us to act in some way. And when those converge, we do something. That's the basic premise. We're not going to go too much into it. But a few examples of just how fine-tuned psychology is behind the user interface design, just as a fancy way of saying basically when you like start playing around with your phone and do stuff on it. Consider the following. So notifications. So we all get these, but I'm sort of specifically talking about the non-human ones that are made to mimic those that you might get from a human. So you might get notifications of a message or a call, but you'll also get notifications for a like or a new video or whatever you're kind of getting notifications for based on the applications that you have. And at least for iPhones, not so much for Androids, but for iPhones, at least especially on my iPad, a lot of times when you get that notification, what do you get? You get a little number, and it's red, that tells you that there's something there, you need to go check it out. Which leads me into the use of warm colors. So they've done eye tracking tests on humans, of course, and we tend to gravitate towards warm colors. So those are things like reds, pinks, yellows, purples, because we tend to like those colors. Which is why then a lot of companies have since updated their icons to incorporate those colors. Instagram is a perfect example of this. I don't know if anyone remembers back in the day that it had this logo, which was, like this cute brown little Polaroid. And I believe, I don't know 100% when it was acquired by Facebook, it became every single warm color you could possibly think of, literally in one logo. And now, obviously, you can look at some other logos and they won't incorporate all these. They're all a little different. Like I want to say, obviously Facebook is blue and I think TikTok is like yellow. But still, a lot of times these, sorry, what were you saying? Oh, I thought you were saying something. But a lot of times you'll just see that these colors are incorporated. And why? Because it's eye-catching. It's literally designed to do that. Next, regarding app content, the most dangerous of apps are those with infinite scrolling and pull to refresh. Infinite scrolling is kind of as it sounds. I don't know if anyone uses Facebook anymore, but if you do, consider your news feed. And when you scroll to the bottom of your news feed, what happens? Keep going, content continues, get to the bottom again, continues. And on it goes, basically a bottomless pit of content. It could be good or bad, you don't know, so you might as well keep scrolling and find out. In that same vein is pull to refresh. And pull to refresh feature mimics that of a slot machine. So what happens when you used to pull the lever of a slot machine? Now I actually push a button, but if you pull the lever, what happens when you do that at a slot machine?
It all changes. So you have the anticipation of what's going to come up next.
Right, and you could win or lose, right? You don't know. But it gives you the semblance of control because you're the one pulling the lever. In this case, you're the one pulling to refresh. But in the day, you don't know what content you're going to get. I know people talk about dopamine hits and all that. That's part of it, but you have no idea. So you might as well pull and see what comes up. But there's sort of this addictive illusion of you actually have control over that, when for the most part it's designed that you don't really, because you don't actually know what content you're going to get. If you did, you probably wouldn't pull the refresh. You probably wouldn't keep scrolling. And finally, video autoplay. And this is more for the likes of YouTube and Netflix, because what happens when you finish an episode on Netflix? It starts counting down, right? And if you don't click it, and I guess if you do, it'll go to the next one faster. If you don't click it, the next episode starts to play. And more often than not, you're kind of locked in, right? You're probably pretty stoked on seeing the next episode. It's already kind of suggested it for you, so you might as well watch it. So, so it's more for the likes of those kinds of, video types of applications. And Reed Hastings, CEO of Netflix, used to confidently say that their main competitor was sleep, which is troubling to say the least, because you could just keep going and keep watching for hours and hours, which some people do. So I probably won't get into this video today, but I just mainly want to mention Tristan Harris. He's a former PM at Google and now the co-founder of the Center for Humane Technology. He's an interesting guy to look up. He's sort of a big whistleblower in Silicon Valley. He was part of BJ Fogg's original class, that Facebook class. He went on to work at Google and basically, after a while, felt pretty disenchanted with the things that him and his classmates had created, some unintentionally, some obviously intentionally, and decided to kind of make a big stink about it in Silicon Valley. You'll see him in movies like The Social Dilemma and other things like that. I actually know him. I've met the guy who dated my friend out in San Francisco. So he's a quirky dude, but he's very smart and just worth checking out. Alrighty, so some key terms. And some things you probably already know, but like starting off with habits. So habits are typically those, I'm sorry, my little names are there. Habits are routines, regular behavior that you tend to have control over and are at times doing them unconsciously. And they can have both positive and negative effects. So when does that become more into a behavioral addiction? Well, so that's usually the result of this habitual behavior, but specifically that was done to relieve pain or even escape reality. So like examples of habits, you know, it could be like getting ready for bed or getting up in the morning rituals or a little more unconscious acts like, picking or biting your nails, not necessarily problematic, but, so the idea of behavioral addiction is a little bit, it's same, but different in the sense that, you're trying to relieve pain or escape from reality. So those kinds of things you have less control over, you're typically dependent on them, and the behavior itself acts as a reward. So obviously we can think a lot about like substance use and stuff like that there. But an example I want to give is for using a smartphone. And I would give the example of the unconscious act of checking. And what I mean by checking is unlocking your smartphone to check the start screen for notifications for updates. So the more frequent this action and the more likely the reward of if there is something interesting or good, you miss something, the stronger the habit. And then the stronger the habit, the more automatic the urge and the greater the chance of developing addictive smartphone behavior. Now, I'm not saying this happens to everybody, but it's just sort of a sense, an idea of like how easily sometimes that can happen without just really thinking about it. It can become unconscious, basically. A habit can become that way. But I do want to mention one thing here. And a lot of people kind of ask, they sort of go, well, how do I know when I've reached that point of problematic smartphone use? And I'm here to tell you we don't actually know. The thing is, we don't have a standard cutoff point at this time. So there's not like a spectrum here. We've created a line down the middle and said, if you go over here, your usage is problematic. If you're over here, it's not problematic. We don't actually know this. It's a lot of gray area. And also, we're still unclear as to whether problematic use should be defined by quantity, which is how much the phone is used, patterns, how the phone is used, or the negative consequences of the usage itself. So this is all still being studied. Part of why I was interested in the research in the first place. But we don't really have that cutoff point yet. So that's still to be determined. Is that clear for everyone? Okay, so who's most affected? So I just pulled one study that I thought was actually pretty interesting. I looked at a bunch, but one I thought was really interesting back in 2019, it's not too long ago. And basically they analyze problematic smartphone use across different age groups. And they pulled components of the model of addiction. We just basically mean to say is they looked at Mark Griffith, another researcher from back in the 90s. And these haven't really changed much, these components of addiction. And I'll go through each of these in relation to smartphone usage. The first one being salience, which means these are the overwhelming dominance and total preoccupation of smartphone use. Mood modification, mood changes experienced directly through the use of smartphones, tolerance, the increase over time of daily hours spent using smartphones, withdrawal symptoms, negative feelings when unable to engage in smartphone use, conflict, intra and interpersonal, either both in and out, problems arising from smartphone use, and relapse, the reversion to addictive smartphone behavior after a period of abstinence. So do they sound kind of familiar to you at all? Anyway. Yeah, substance use, right? Exactly. And other studies did explain how they went and looked at the 8 psychological criteria. That's our big book called the DSM. I don't go too much into it, where all the disorders are. But they looked at those criteria for substance use disorders and saw they had relevance to similar problematic smartphone usage symptoms. So a lot of what you can do is you can look at sentences that have the word alcohol in it as smartphone. So you could say that drinking while driving is dangerous. Using your smartphone while driving is dangerous. You could say, I have my personal relationships are being affected by my alcohol usage. You could say my personal relationships are being affected by my smartphone usage. Other examples are, I have arguments with family and friends because of my alcohol usage, or my social interactions and activities are impacted by my alcohol usage, and you could replace that with smartphone. And for the most part, it kind of works. So that's just sort of gives you a sense of like how much overlap there can be with this when it comes to addiction and why this is important to look at and study. So in regards to that study itself, who's most affected? They found basically everyone's affected. Everyone is affected. So all these age groups, granted, obviously it's in different, some of the different components, but across the board, all age groups are affected in some way, shape, or form, which just means to say that it, as I put here, statistics proven the continued need to extend research on the effects across all age groups. But of course, there are some age groups that are standing out a little bit more, being that 20 to 34 age group, which maybe some folks are within that, and 12 to 19, maybe again, some folks might be within that age group here as well. So y'all are pretty affected, which doesn't mean that, that's like a terrible thing. But, because they looked at this, and as with any research, there's always gray area. And they looked at like, well, this age, this time in one's life, you are using your phone a lot. You're probably traveling a lot. You're engaging socially a lot. You're job seeking. So it's just, there is a lot of usage during this time. But the main thing being, though, it does reflect a significant amount of dependence on the smartphone. So that's where, it makes sense that there's a lot of usage, but there's also a lot of dependence on the phone itself, right? So that's kind of what this was saying, which also led me to have an interest in sort of where I wanted to go with my research as well. Oh, yeah.
Wait, when was that study done?
So this was done in 2019. So as with all research, a lot of times the research is done on university students, just because it's a very easy population to get to do research, because they just like give you pizza and do a survey, which is, it's helpful for us research, so thank you. But this was one of the fewer studies that I found that had gone across all age groups. So I haven't seen like as many that have done that. But yeah, this one's 2019, so a few years old. But I imagine, there probably is still some fluctuation. And obviously with all this too, who knows like where COVID kind of plays into it as well. So sure, things have changed. There's always, adjustments. Any other questions? So some popular tech terms, I'm not going to go through all of these, but the main ones I wanted to highlight are social usage and process usage. Okay. Obviously in relation to your phone. So social usage is as it sounds. It's things that are social. So it's like engaging in networking, messaging, phone calls, maintaining social relationships. It's social. Process usage is engaging a smartphone for news consumption, entertainment, relaxation, and other primarily non-social purposes. Now, I do want to highlight here that there is a gray area, right? Because again, for those who maybe use Facebook, you could go onto Facebook and you could go onto your feed and you can get news, but then you can also comment, like, and engage in a social way. So there's overlap here, but the gist of it is that social is for social and then process is for process. Understanding everything, there is some gray. But now a question I have for you guys is, according to current research, which one, social to process usage, do you think is more correlated with problematic smartphone use? It's like more likely to have problematic smartphone use based off of social or process usage?
Social.
Social. Okay. Anyone here on the side? Which one out of social or process usage do you think is more likely, not to cause, but more correlated with problematic smartphone usage?
Social.
Okay. Social. Back.
I'll be different, I'll say process.
Okay, all right, we got someone stepping out of it. All right. Well, the answer is process. But social is not out of the woods entirely. It's got its own issues, of course. But process usage has shown to be more correlated, more likely to be related to having problematic smartphone usage and increased anxiety. Okay. This can overlap with social, as I was saying, but social usage has shown to be more connected to narcissistic tendencies, not necessarily problematic use. So it's not to say that, one is worse or whatever. It's just that it's more likely that if you're using your phone in this way, and maybe you're like, just, I don't know, going down the rabbit hole, bad news or whatever it could be affecting you more. You could be end up using your device more for that versus for like a quick social interaction. But as I said, social's got its own some stuff as well. So yeah. All right, well, another question for you guys. Okay. So by show of hands, do you believe that problematic phone usage, or does problematic phone usage cause psychological disorders such as depression, anxiety, etc.? Anyone who thinks that the phone usage causes the depression, anxiety? Sorry, showing us one more time. Okay, great. Okay, or does an individual who is depressed or anxious engage in more problematic phone usage? Got it back. Okay. So there's a common misconception that if you use your phone in a certain way, you're gonna get anxious, you're gonna get sad. You know, this is where the movie The Social Dilemma kind of made it a little tricky, because they started showing like a teenage girl looking at her Instagram or whatever and getting all like body image issues and all that stuff, right? But the truth of the matter is that what actually happens is that you have life stressors. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in your life. Could be things with health, academics, relationships, etc. And some of these things could be really stressing you out, and you could possibly get depressed. You could possibly start feeling anxious. You could possibly start feeling socially anxious. COVID happens and you don't want to go out anymore. You're socially anxious, right? And so with that, with this possible development of the psychological disorders, sorry, I don't know why this keeps popping up here, it then could lead to possible problematic phone use. And I say possible each time because this is not necessarily like the same for everybody, right? So something happens in your life that's very stressful. You could develop psychological disorders. You could then begin to use your phone in a more problematic way, which could then lead to the possible worsening of psychological symptoms. So the main thing being is that someone was already predisposed to being down, to being sad, to having body image issues. They're already feeling that way. And then through the use of their device in a certain way, that actually just made the symptoms worse. That made them more sad. That made them more likely to feel worse about themselves. So does this kind of negative feedback loop sort of make sense? Because there is this very, and in fact, I'm trying very hard to debunk the whole thing that if you use your device, that is what's going to make you anxious and depressed. You were already kind of there. Yes.
So we actually had someone online. They said that they thought that either one could come first because there have been times where technology, like social media, made them feel worse. But there are also times, like right now, where they rely on technology to manage their depression. And by manage their depression, they do mean drowning themselves in constant stimulation so that they don't feel bad.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. And so I think, you know, there is sort of this chicken or the egg kind of thing with this. And the main thing being that, you know, when one starts to kind of use their phone in a certain way that does try to relieve them or escape or what have you, that kind of goes back to what we were talking about with the habits versus behavioral addictions, right? When it starts to become more problematic because you're doing it in a way in order to relieve some kind of pain. So when that starts happening, that is a problem. I mean, that could be a problem for anything, but specifically in this case, obviously for how you're using your device and what you're using it for. If you're avoiding social situations and going onto your phone, if you're trying to distract yourself because you're feeling down, these are things in which it's just sort of having to kind of be aware of. I mean, a lot of this is around awareness of your usage and how it could actually be feeding into possibly making you feel worse. Again, everything is only possible and probably because no two people are alike, and some people are heavy phone users and they're absolutely fine. So this is just that's why I take into account that there already is something going on in your life that's making you feel a certain way, and you might already be, already feeling anxious, down, etc. Alrighty. So my research. Um, so I was looking at adults who are at least 20 years of age and older, which I know hopefully doesn't exclude people in this room. But again, if you think about it, 18 and 19-year-olds, I don't know if there would have been that much difference, to be honest. Maybe in the application there was maybe. And granted, obviously, as I'll get to eventually later, like in the grand scheme, I had a small pool of people. I had 101 people, so it's not like a longitudinal study. It's not a huge study. But it's still very interesting. It still contributes to research. And I examined the following variables together: intolerance of uncertainty, anxiety, social anxiety, and depression. I'll get into those in the next slide. And I wanted to look at what we call objective behavioral measures, which was actually getting screenshots from people's devices that ship from Apple Screen Time or Android Digital Wellbeing applications to your phones to see what their actual usage was. So it wasn't just self-report, but self-report did come from a selection of standardized measures for surveys, which I gave out as well. So it's a little bit of both. Okay, and then so real briefly on the variables that I looked at, anxiety, social anxiety, you guys should probably know, depression, intolerance of uncertainty. Have you heard of this one? So intolerance of uncertainty is an interesting one. When an individual finds uncertainty stressful or distressing and doesn't function well in uncertain situations, basically situations which you don't know what's going to happen. And they might hold negative beliefs about uncertainty, might try to avoid it or try to control it, eliminate it. So my, examples of intolerance of uncertainty, I feel, at least in regards to smartphone usage, is like, if you don't know where you're going, what are you using to find your way? Google Maps, right? Could you possibly imagine yourself trying to just find a place anymore? Probably not. It's uncertain. You don't like know uncertain. It's like, no, I'm in Google Maps. What about, I don't know, do y'all use like Yelp and stuff? No. That's a little bit at the back. Like when this is more for me. I have a hard time just going to a restaurant without checking the reviews. I want to know if I'm going somewhere good and going to spend my money wisely. So I go check reviews and I go see how many stars they have. It's too uncertain for me to just walk in somewhere and be like, okay, let's try it. So, that's self-disclosure. We all have this a little bit, just kind of shows the different ways, and we can have this in relation to how we use our phones too, which is what I was interested in for my research. All right, so the results. All right, so I'm going to be asking you guys, you're going to tell me the results. All right, so one of the first research questions I had is, smartphone addiction explained more by depression or anxiety? Starting off here with self-report. So that's these measures people did. So this is people actually like reporting themselves. So which one do you think?
Anxiety.
The guesses in the room? Or with anxiety?
Depression.
Okay. One is the other. Depression. What happened? Next one. So remember process usage, social usage. There was a difference between those. Yeah. So I'm saying when process usage is greater than, more of it than social, it was an increase in symptoms for which psychological disorder? And so anxiety, social anxiety, intolerance of uncertainty, or depression. Again, self-report. Which do you think?
Depression. Social anxiety.
Okay. Social anxiety. Yup. Right. Next one. All right, individuals who engage in problematic smartphone usage, again, self-report, so they're saying they have it, right? They're reporting that they feel like they do. Had greater levels of which of the following symptoms for which of the following?
Anxiety.
All of the above. But I do want to, but depression and social anxiety were somewhat more significant, somewhat small percentage. And I want to highlight something with social anxiety. It's come up a few times here, right? this study is being done during COVID. Okay, so that definitely affected my results. So this study was done again, like post-COVID, who knows what the results would be, right? I mean, that's the thing with research. When you look at research, see when it's done, what was happening, all that. This was a COVID study. Didn't mean to be that way, but that's when I had to get done. So social anxiety came up a lot. And I think that's pretty like reasonable, right? We were anxious and socially anxious, especially, so we couldn't be around people. So keep that in mind. I always think of that when you're looking at research, always like check what was happening, because that does impress upon the results. Doesn't mean it's invalid, it just means it's know about it. All right, so now we're getting into my objective data. So this was screenshots. This was data pulled directly from people's phones. They didn't have any say in this of what was happening or how they were using their device. So greater screen time in hours was more associated with which of the following? Depression. Okay. Can always be more than one. It was anxiety and depression. Yeah, anxiety, always anxiety. And then again, another objective data pull. A higher amount of phone pickups, that's iPhone users only, because that's screen time tracked that Androids do not. Meaning pickups, the way they describe that is everything you pick up and interact with your phone. So not just like picking it up, but like picking up and doing something on it. So a higher amount of that was more associated with which of the following? This was disappointing.
Intolerance of uncertainty.
I was really hoping I got more from my objective data.
So like there was no correlation at all.
No.
Or,
Nothing, not that I found.
I also I think the iPhone doesn't do a well job tracking. I like to say that.
I mean, I will get into in a minute why the tracking isn't perfect. Because you're right. It's not the pickups are not every time you pick it up.
But yeah, but sometimes I tap my phone away. Does that count?
That you what?
But I tap my phone away. Like sometimes it's already out, so I tap it away.
What if you check the
Does that
time?
count?
Does that count?
Yeah.
It's you know what it is you typically the pickup is you have to like unlock and interact. You picked up and you did something.
Because when you pick it up, you really unlock.
Oh, for the face, that can be a thing, which is why, I mean, even this tracking is not perfect. And I will show you in a minute why it's an imperfect thing, which is part of what we're trying to figure out with the research. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting there and trying to figure out a better way to track. But exactly, and I'll be getting into that too. A high weekly average of phone notifications, again, iPhone users only, was more associated with which of the following?
Anxiety.
None.
Yeah, so the house because
Yep. But I did do some additional analyses. Phone usage and stress, unsurprisingly, stress is highly associated with problematic use. It's not surprising. But then what do you feel like were the most used smartphone applications? Now, granted, I had a group of people, 101 with an age of 20 to like 74. So, you know, but what do you think?
Instagram, TikTok,
Snapchat.
Instagram for sure.
Yep.
Maps. Google Maps. But are we kind of like any and all?
Any at all.
Yeah. Is YouTube an app?
YouTube an app. Could be an app. The top ones for this group was messages. So like no one's using their phone to call people anymore, apparently. Instagram, you're right. And yes, Google Maps, which is part of where the tracking is a problem, right? Because the phone itself is doing exactly that, it's tracking. But it doesn't really know your use. What if you have long commutes, right? Your screen time is really high because you're using your maps and you're using your maps a whole lot. So your screen time's up and everything. Is that problematic? You're commuting a lot, right? So this is where the tracking is far from perfect. And how you said, you know, with certain phones, you just like look at it and it opens up and everything. It's like, we're we're still not there yet. And that's the same thing when I go back and talk about research, like, you know, it's valid, but you do have to kind of take these things into consideration that it's not perfect. And there's these ways in which we just haven't yet gotten to a point of figuring out exactly how to do this in a way that's standardized and isn't going to pull Google Maps. And I don't feel like using Google Maps is necessarily a problem in certain cases, obviously. But so yeah, so that's just sort of exactly the point I'm trying to make, and that it's not a perfect system with this at all. This is a donut that shows you a visual of it. So you know, you can kind of see where it went. I just think it's kind of a fun visual.
So is this for iPhone only?
So this was actually iPhone and Android, but there were just certain aspects of data that iPhone, that screen time gathered, either gathered better or only gathered versus what was gathered on Android. Screen time is more of a robust application compared to digital well-being. Also, that Android phones aren't necessarily the same across all Android devices. Like a Pixel phone will be different from a Samsung, will be different from a Motorola, or all that different stuff. So digital well-being then kind of reflects that too, and that it'll look a little bit different, and what it tracks is different, which is very annoying. So unfortunately, there's a lot of data that I couldn't get as much from Android users as I could get from iPhone users, because screen time is the same across all iPhone devices, Apple devices.
And that's interesting because I feel like messages is such an integrated part of my iPhone use that I don't even think about it as an app anymore.
Yeah, right?
My question's because I see Safari and Chrome.
Yeah. Yeah. And that falls, I think that falls in the same category as like Google Maps.
And then like Gmail is higher than Mail. So that's why I'm like, oh, you know.
Yeah.
And then WhatsApp and.
Well, I think, yeah, so Gmail, yes, I mean, probably most people are using Google Suite versus using Apple Mail.
What about like those messages that was, I don't know, I'm just like looking at it and I'm like. Because WhatsApp is used for, like, I think personally that it's used for within a very niche group of people. So like if you were to compare like their messages versus WhatsApp versus like someone who does own it but doesn't really use it, like how would you?
So like the demographics
Yeah.
of this study group or like this focus group definitely played into the.
Exactly. And so we had a bigger study that went across the US, that maybe was across more age groups, etc. This would look different for sure. But still interesting. So the big question is, what can you do about it? So you should ask yourself in regards to your smartphone usage is, when you're using your phone, which activities make you feel good? Which activities make you feel bad? And what behaviors or habits would you like to change? And so, you know, you can get a sense of your usage patterns by using screen time digital well-being. You can start to kind of get an idea of, you know, maybe use it, you know, at certain times of day more, certain days of the week, or when certain things are happening. And with that, you can kind of monitor usage and adjust as needed. So that is one way to sort of try and think about things, just have a greater awareness of what your usage is. You can create app limits. You can do that in some of these native applications, in which you can set timers for how long you can use certain applications that you might feel like you use them in a problematic way. You can disable notifications entirely. So as we were talking about the notifications that kind of pop up and make you want to check your phone, you can disable those. You can set up bedtime and or focus mode. That's for Android, downtime for iPhone. So that means like no disturbances. Usually your phone goes into grayscale. You take away those warm colors, right? That's very helpful. Things that you can try, again, like, so this is harder, easier said than done. Do not charge your phone by your bed. I know we all kind of use it for your alarm, maybe you can put it across the room and actually have to walk up and get it. I don't do that, I should. And then think about what you would do with your reclaimed time. So this is kind of a bit of a reframe here, get a little more psychological on that, of like setting goals. Like if you actually got your time back, what would you do with it? You know, if you weren't scrolling through TikTok for hours on end, what would you be doing with that time? So that's kind of a sort of just like even thinking about it and sort of seeing how you can actually just like reclaim it and sort of make that time your own again, versus that of these addictive applications. And then some other ideas is regularly change the location of the apps on your home screen. That's kind of an interesting one because that sort of kind of goes back into habits of that you would find that if you start moving things around, your finger, your thumb, or whatever is going to go to where that application was. You literally are sort of developing like patterns in your brain of where you're going every time you're going onto your phone. So if you switch things around a bit, it makes it a bit harder. I have friends who've taken all the applications off their home screen and they have to literally go in and like search for things just to make it that much harder to actually get to it, which can slow things down a bit and sometimes help with the use of it. You can delete apps. It is doable. You just have to want to. Maybe only use it on your desktop or your laptop versus on your phone. Try not to use your phone for the first 30, 60 minutes of your day. Again, I realize that can be easier said than done. But again, it's kind of that replaying time and sort of trying to make that your own versus someone else's, versus seeing what someone else wants of you with emails, you know, what's due, what's, you know, whatever, someone bugging you about something, like making it so that first 30 to 60 minutes of your day is yours versus someone else as they're trying to get you through your phone. If you can go somewhere safely without your phone, keyword safely, try doing so. Try to spend time with people in real life versus through text or FaceTime or video chat. You know, obviously, we have reached a point in which hopefully COVID and other things won't, you know, get in the way of this. But so if you can go somewhere safely and hang out with someone, might as well just do that versus doing FaceTime. Schedule your phone usage cheat moments, kind of like cheat days with eating. So instead of, you could probably do it at the same time if you really wanted to, but sort of the idea that kind of creates like, yeah, so think like have your cheat moments with, you know, eating the brownies or whatever, you have like your cheat moment for, you know, some application that you just really, really just love, I guess. Being fully on, fully off. So that one is kind of interesting one of when you're on, you put your phone away and focus on work. And when you're off, you learn to let go of your work and relax. Because basically what research has shown is that most people have a really hard time with being fully on or being fully off in regards to the devices. Like you're trying to be on and really focus on your work, you're getting distracted by your phone and you're not fully on anymore, you're actually distracted. And when you're trying to relax and actually just engage in some self-care, again, you're also potentially on your device and not being fully off and relaxed. So it's sort of this idea of really trying to be more intentional about being either fully on, fully focused, or what have you, or being fully off and relaxed and kind of disengaged in some ways. Because no wonder we get so burnt out. We're just completely inundated with like information stuff on our phones. So it's, you know, this is something that's just sort of like to really just try and kind of be more intentional about. And then while it might seem counterintuitive, is trying other apps like Moment, Forest, Flip, Space, Off Time, and more. Again, with all of these, it's choosing what's best for you. There'll probably be some trial and error. It's not going to be perfect. But, you know, if you're wanting to make some changes, these are some ideas of how to start that process. And with that, I will open the floor to questions. Also, please do not leave without scanning and filling us out. This gives us a lot of helpful feedback. It's me helpful feedback for me and for the Counseling Center. So please fill that out. You can also go to this link, but I think this is the short is going to be easier. And yeah, any questions, comments? I'm happy to field those. And if there's anything from online as well, let me know. But I appreciate you all being here.